Welcome to the Tremendous Hustle channel, everyone. Once again, the Indiana Pacers win. They close out their series against the Cleveland Cavs 4-1. Pacers in 5. I didn't see it that way, I'll be honest. I thought the Pacers could possibly win in 7 if it got that far, but based on the circumstances that the Cavs went through with some injuries, and also I think just a lot of their bench guys just didn't show up in the series at all. They weren't injured. The majority of them weren't. Ty Jerome, Dean Wade, they got almost nothing from their bench in most games. Ty Jerome had an okay scoring game in game 1, but he missed a ton of shots. He took 20 shots. And to have somebody come off the bench doing that and not being efficient or effective and playmaking either was not enough to beat the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers were deep. They had 6 or 7 guys in double figures almost every game. In fact, I believe 6 players are averaging double figures in the playoffs for the Pacers. And their depth truly was their strength. Of course, Tyrese Haliburton is the head of the snake, as even Donovan Mitchell and some of the other players said going into the series. But despite some off nights shooting from Tyrese, the Pacers still were able to win this thing pretty comfortably in the end. The theme of the series was that the Pacers would start off slow, except for 2 games. The 2 of their wins came from behind. So we'll talk a little bit about how the Cavs failed to hold on to leads. They surrendered big leads in 3 of the 4 games. And that's a problem of coaching and conditioning. I think those are the 2 C's that you have to think about when you think about the Cavs. 1, Donovan Mitchell, although I love the way he plays and how well and how fast he plays, how fierce he is at attacking the basket, the one thing about him is that he always breaks down every single year in the playoffs. He usually either misses a game or he is somehow unavailable or hobbled. He seems to be in great condition too, so I don't know really what the reason is for that, but it's just always something, leg injuries. Maybe it's just because of the way that he attacks the basket, like we've seen with many other players in the past. Ja Morant, for example, players who are above the rim players and players who attack the rim constantly sometimes are just more likely to have soft tissue injuries, ankle injuries, and things of that nature. But despite all those things, that's one thing, conditioning. But I think a lot of the other players just weren't conditioned to play this much and play that fast either. Jarrett Allen looked dog tired by the second half of game 5. He really looked tired in game 4. But game 5, he just looked like he was running on fumes. Got off to a good start, got a few easy buckets, got some dunks. They put him in motion off pick and roll action, and coming from the baseline, he was able to sneak backdoor to get a couple baskets early on. But I think he's not used to running as much as he had. Their lack of a backup center that can come in and give them 15, 20 minutes on nights like that when Jarrett Allen just doesn't have it, just doesn't have the energy, is really ultimately what kind of led to their downfall. So their lack of conditioning, they had plenty of depth, but their depth wasn't conditioned to run as much as the Pacers, whether it's the starting 5 or the bench. And in fact, the bench is actually a little bit faster when you put in TJ McConnell, Ben Mathurin, Obi Toppin, and even Thomas Bryant. Thomas Bryant can get up and down the court actually a little bit faster than Miles Turner. He has other weaknesses and other deficiencies, but when it comes to getting back on defense and getting up the floor, Thomas Bryant is actually pretty quick for a guy his size. So they're conditioned to run all game long because they've been doing it all season long. And you see I got on the Pacers versus Knicks shirt, foreshadowing, because I believe that's who's going to wind up in the conference finals. It almost just feels like that's what's going to happen. We're going to run it back. But anyway, back to the Pacers and how they have been so effective in the playoffs this year. Looked up some stats and have 6 interesting stats that I think really detail how the Pacers have been able to do this. 1, their win percentage. They finished the regular season with a 61% win percentage, but in the playoffs from January 1st to right now in the playoffs, they're at like a 71% win percentage. In fact, I saw a stat that they have the 3rd best record, including the playoffs, from January 1st of all the playoff teams. The only 2 teams that are better are Oklahoma City and the Boston Celtics. So the Boston Celtics, Oklahoma City, and the Indiana Pacers have the most wins since January 1st, including the playoffs. That's why they're a contender. It's not just a fluke. It's not just that they got hot in the playoffs, but no, they've been hot since January. Going back to January, I looked at some of the things that I tweeted about or that I reposted. And one interesting stat as well regarding the Pacers defense is that they've been significantly better since January. So January, in the month of January itself, they were rated the third best defensive team in the NBA. They went on a really good win streak there. I think where they won like 10 out of 11 games or something along those lines. And their defense was the reason. Their intensity, their ability to pressure you 3/4 of the court all the way up the floor for 90% of the game is unmatched. No team in the NBA applies as much pressure as the Pacers. And so their defense is another reason why they're here. Their three-point shooting was fantastic. They shot 52% from beyond the arc against the Cavs and held the Cavs to 23% three-point shooting. That is remarkable. A lot of people aren't going to credit their defense. They're going to say that, well, the Pacers play fast and they score. But no, it was the defense that got it done. They were getting multiple stops in a row, 4 or 5 stops in a row, and scoring off of those misses. You can't beat a team like that. If the team is able to score as well as the Pacers can, but they're also getting stops and preventing you from scoring, you're going to lose a lot of games. Now, rebounding was an issue for the Pacers all season long, but they stayed pretty even with Cleveland, which Cleveland is a better rebounding team than them. That's a very surprising stat to me, is that the Pacers, even though they did get out rebounded a few games, they actually won the rebounding battle enough to where over the series, they were just about even. I believe they both averaged around 43 rebounds a game. Now, Cavs had more offensive rebounds than the Pacers, but total rebounds, they're about the same. If the Pacers can stay close in that rebounding battle, they can beat anyone. And points in the paint. This is an area usually where the Pacers dominate, but Cleveland, when they were at their best in game 3, they dominated the points in the paint. But overall, the Pacers do a good job of getting points in the paint. They don't just shoot threes. They don't just get layups. They actually use the mid-range as well very effectively in this series. So when you have a team that can score on all 3 levels and also is getting defense, good defense, they're going to be hard to beat. And lastly, Andrew Nembhard. Andrew Nembhard, so where he held Donovan Mitchell on the possessions where he guarded Donovan Mitchell, and he was a primary defender, held Donovan Mitchell to 31% shooting. When you have a lockdown defender like that, and we've seen this from Andrew Nembhard, he played very effectively against many top shooting guards, point guards. He held Damian Lillard. Of course, Dame was hobbled, but even in the regular season, when he was matched up against Dame and Dame was healthy, he held Dame way under his shooting percentage. When they played the Timberwolves, he held Anthony Edwards. He held Anthony Edwards way under his shooting percentage. And so he's just developing that ability now to stop. Now, certain guys like Tatum or Jaylen Brown will be very difficult. We don't have to worry about Tatum this year due to the injury, but Jaylen Brown, if Jaylen Brown and the Boston Celtics advance, Jaylen Brown's going to be a problem, no matter who the Pacers put on him, because he has the ability to just raise up and shoot over them. And Andrew Nembhard is the X factor. He's the playoff riser on the Pacers roster that has enabled them to be as good as they are in this playoffs. If he continues to shoot the ball as well as he's shooting, as well from 3, almost 50%, around 50% from 3, this is going to be a very, very difficult team for any team to beat, whether it's the Knicks, the Celtics, or even beyond. Yes, I think I see the Pacers making the finals this year. I believe this is their year to do it. And the reason they're doing this is because of, one, their offense. They create so many wide open shots because of Tyrese Haliburton and Andrew Nembhard. They have 2 very good passers on the floor at all time. When Andrew Nembhard goes to the bench, TJ McConnell may come in and play alongside Tyrese, vice versa. So they always have 2 good playmakers, passers, that can throw that skip pass. When you try to double them, they throw the skip pass and make your defense rotate over and over and over and over again until you make a mistake. And when you make a mistake, they capitalize on it. That is going to be different. They don't have to rely on ISO ball. They can ISO if necessary, but they don't rely on it. In fact, most of their ISOs come from making you rotate first and them getting a mismatch on you, and then they take advantage of that. So when you have a team that's disciplined, their basketball IQ is extremely high, they have finals written on them. They just look like a finals team to me right now. Of course, I'll be so happy about that. And looking forward to the Eastern Conference Finals, however, and What do you think? I'd love to hear what you think. Please, in the comments, tell me what you think. Do you think the Pacers have what it takes to go all the way, or at least make it to the finals? And if so, why? If not, tell me why. All right, until the next one, thanks for watching.